certainly a pleasure to be here speaking to you today. I do have to offer one disclaimer right up front, which is that since I've been working for the White House for about 2 months now, I have to put this in front of this talk. This is because I tried to get clearance for the talk, and they said, you better make this a personal talk. So this is a personal talk and does not reflect the views of the President or the administration. And as necessary, I may flash this disclaimer again. So with that in mind, there's really 2 things I want to get across today. Because what I want to talk about is precision medicine and the Precision Medicine Initiative. And there's really 2 points here, which are that rare disease needs precision medicine, and in fact, precision medicine needs rare disease. And I'll be clear about both of these as I go forward. So if you haven't heard the term precision medicine, I'll define it now for you very briefly. It was actually defined by the President himself when he launched this Precision Medicine Initiative about 1.5 years ago. And the short version is, when you're doing precision medicine if you are attempting to do data-driven medicine. If you're pulling in all the data about a patient from their electronic health record, then you're starting to do precision medicine, particularly when you make it genome guided. So if you're pulling in genome data or omics data to make medical decisions, you're now doing precision medicine. Because what you're trying to do at this point is deliver exactly the right drug to the right patient at the right time. That's the essence of precision medicine. And the way this works is you take your patient, you grab your omics data, which might be genome sequencing or exome sequencing, where you're actually looking at the contents of their genome. And from this, you're trying to look at the molecular cause of their disease and formulate a very precise treatment based on that molecular cause. That's the whole idea behind precision medicine. So why am I telling you about this? Well, it turns out I wear sort of 3 hats when it comes to precision medicine. As a parent, as a researcher, and now as a civil servant at the White House. And the reason that I'm involved as a parent is that 8 years ago, my son Bertrand was born. And to make a long story very short, we spent 4 years on a diagnostic odyssey trying to figure out what was happening to him. We had no idea why he had seizures, why he had a movement disorder, why he had extreme developmental delay, and why for some reason he couldn't cry tears. So for 4 years, we had no idea what was going on. And then, after 4 years, we met a team of scientists at Duke University, or we'd been working with them for a while. They said, we think we can solve this case using a new technology called exome sequencing. We think we can find the mutations driving your son's disease. So what they did is they sequenced all 3 of us. They sequenced me and my wife and my son. They said, let's look for the possible genetic causes of this disorder. What they found were 2 loss-of-function mutations in a gene called NGLY1. And in fact, this was the cause of the disease. But then came some very interesting information along with that. They said that your son appears to be the first and, in fact, the only case of this we have ever seen. So they said there's never been a record of human disease being associated with this particular gene before, and yet we are pretty confident that this is what this is. So this is certainly a startling result to get as a parent. But what it did for us is it took us to the peak of our diagnostic journey. It's actually a journey that many of the children that go through the Undiagnosed Diseases program and the network are on and ultimately finish because of that program. And when you go through this journey, when you finally reach that peak, you get this perspective on what it's going to take to ultimately reach understanding, treatment, and cure for your child's disease or for your disease, depending on what the case may be. And we learned very quickly that as difficult as it had been on that 4-year diagnostic odyssey, actually reaching a treatment was going to be many times more challenging still. But that's the path we've been on for the prior 4 years, and it's actually been a rather fruitful path at that. So once you get a molecular diagnosis, you can actually start to understand what's going on down at the smallest scales. And what this involves is really understanding what this mutation means for a particular patient. And in the case of my son, what has happened is he's lacking an enzyme called N-glycanase, which is responsible for deglycosylating misfolded glycoproteins after they've been retrotranslocated from the endoplasmic reticulum into the cytoplasm. So obviously what's happening is that he cannot recycle these misfolded glycoproteins, and they're piling up inside his cells. And in fact, at the same time, they appear to be, actually thanks to some insights from one of Bill's programs at the NIH, locking up key nutrients. There's a metabolite that's gone into deficit, or appears to be in deficit in these patients as a result. And it turns out this metabolite, represented by this little blue square right here, is available on Amazon. So my son's missing this thing, or appears to be missing this thing, and you can buy it on Amazon. So I did what any parent would do. I took a bottle of it myself, and because that's how I do safety testing. And in my household, I am the FDA. So that's why I have to remind you. Only applies in my household. And when I gave it to him, something remarkable happened. After about 3 days, he actually started crying tears for the first time in his life. This was really remarkable. We certainly didn't expect to see that. And did what any parent would do. We collected his tears, packed them on dry ice, and shipped him to a lab in California for analysis. Because Because we want to understand what had we just done, and it's actually yielded a lot of insight into the mechanism of this disease, the fact that we get this effect. And we've actually made progress since then, because we want to do more than just give them tears. We want to actually do the best we can in terms of correcting the overall disorder, which again involves seizures and severe developmental delay and a movement disorder. And I'm lucky that I'm also a professor of computer science, and so I thought this is a time where we can actually start to apply computer science to biology and medicine. This is actually a major fixture of what I would call clinical precision medicine, because we can identify a modifier for this disorder, and then using computational simulations, look for small molecule drugs that might actually interact with this modifier for the disorder and improve the patient's lives. And we started doing this about 3 months ago, and we've already found about 70 compounds that may have this beneficial effect for the children. 14 of them happen to be FDA approved already. And so we're in the lab right now using mass spectrometry to test whether or not these actually have the molecular effect we're looking for before we give them to the patients themselves. But in general, how do you scale up this entire process? This is really what I'm concerned about when I'm not acting as a parent. When I'm acting for the White House or when I'm acting as a researcher, what I want to know is how do we do this for everybody? And I think we've already got some ideas of how this is done. So Bill just mentioned the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. And to me, this is really the best organization in the world when it comes to diagnostic precision medicine. There's really nobody else who does it better than UDN. And I think they're defining the model that everybody else will follow for years to come. And then, if we want to do precision medicine at scale, we have to get a lot more data, as it turns out. And this is where the NIH comes in with the precision medicine cohort. And the idea here is they want to get 1 million Americans to volunteer their electronic health records and ultimately their entire genetic data to be part of a longitudinal study so that we can start to unravel what the genome really means. And the way I describe it is what we're doing here is we're building a genetic telescope so that we can point this thing at any part of the genome into this 1 million person cohort and say, what does this mutation do? What does this gene do? How is it affecting real people's lives? When you point this at enough people, what starts to happen when you get enough genome sequences is you start to be able to unravel to figure out what the correlations are between parts of the genome and specific diseases. Because right now, it turns out, if you look at the genome, we don't understand most of it. We actually have a lot of gaps in our knowledge of the human genome. So sequencing the human genome, which was this massive effort, that turns out to be the easy part. Understanding the human genome, that's hard. And that requires something like the scale of a 1 million person cohort, maybe even bigger than that, to really get it right. And this is where I think precision medicine really benefits from rare disease, because when we get rare disease patients into a cohort like this, they actually significantly amplify and magnify the statistical power we get out of our analyses. Because rare diseases take a gene and they maximize its effect on the patient, which is terrible for the patient, it's terrible for our kids. But scientifically speaking, it's incredibly valuable, because they really show us what these genes are doing. So I think the more rare disease patients we can get into this program, the more and the faster we can learn about what the human genome is really doing. And in some sense, if we get enough rare disease patients in there, we can build the Hubble telescope equivalent of this genomic telescope. And so that's why I think we really need the rare disease community to rally together and enroll in this program in as large as numbers as we possibly can. And the other reason I think this is important is that rare disease patients already know how to engage at a level that's well beyond the typical patient. We are so used to being in studies, we're so used to donating our data, we're so used to, if we have to, compromising our privacy, that we're going to be some of those valuable members and participants of this cohort program. So whereas the typical average American, we're not even sure why they might want to join this program just yet. We're trying to come up with the incentives to bring them on board. Rare disease patients already have an incentive to contribute. We want to know more about ourselves, and this is a program that will tell us that. And why is this so critical? Well, because we're already doing genome sequencing in a clinical context. And oftentimes, when these sequences come back, you get variants and mutations in genes that we don't quite understand what they do. And this creates real issues for real people all the time. So we have to answer questions like, well, if you do happen to have this, if we do happen to get a variant that we don't know what it does, and it's a gene that's really important, like a cancer predisposition gene, should we tell you if we don't know what it's doing? I mean, these are real ethical dilemmas that are coming up and have to be faced on a daily basis. And we're not even sure how we should tell you once we decide that we should, so that we can convey this information properly. And this is also going to be a major focus of the program at NIH, to figure out how to answer these questions as well. How do we answer these questions? And then the FDA, actually, this is important because agencies like the FDA, they're going to be heavily involved in the return of results to patients so that we get the right information back. And I want to point to one particularly interesting initiative at FDA called the Precision FDA program, where they're creating a platform that will allow for consistent interpretation of genomic data. Because right now, if you get your genome sequenced in multiple places and interpreted by multiple people, you could get very different interpretations of the exact same data. And so with the FDA and this program, they're building a common platform for analysis so that you can take one genome and get one interpretation, or hopefully the most consistent possible interpretation of your data. So to conclude, I still want to emphasize that rare disease definitely needs precision medicine. This is the way forward for us to attack the many monogenic disorders we face, and it is absolutely the case that precision medicine and the Precision Medicine Initiative can sincerely benefit from the engagement and the scientific power of the rare disease community. Thank you.